She thought spilling coffee on a stranger would end her miserable life. Instead, it started a new one she never asked for. Adrian Voss didn't just forgive the clumsy waitress who ruined his $1,000 suit. He paid off her debts, pulled her from poverty, and told her the truth that shattered everything. He'd been watching her for years, protecting her from shadows she never knew existed, waiting for the right moment to make her his. What happens when obsession wears the face of salvation? Stay until the end to find out, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button. You're going to need something to hold on to. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, and Lena Park was drowning in it. Not literally, though there were moments, standing at the kitchen sink with her hands submerged in greasy dishwater at 2 in the morning, when she wondered if that might be easier. The rain hammered the roof of Maggie's bakery like it had a personal vendetta, leaking through the ceiling in the back corner where the tiles had given up months ago. Lena had positioned a dented aluminum pot to catch the drips. The steady plink, plink, plink punctuated every miserable hour of her shift like a countdown to nowhere. She was 18 years old and felt 40. The bakery sat on a forgotten corner of the city's east side, wedged between a pawn shop that never seemed to open and a laundromat that always smelled like burnt rubber. Once upon a time, it had been charming, the kind of place where old ladies bought fresh bread and families picked up birthday cakes. That was before Maggie died and left the business to her sister, Lena's Aunt Claire, who had about as much interest in baking as she did in paying off the debts she'd racked up at every casino within a 50-mile radius, which meant the debts fell to Lena. Not legally, not officially, but in the way that mattered when men with cold eyes showed up at closing time, looking for Claire and settling for whoever was behind the counter. Lena had learned to keep her head down, hand over whatever cash was in the register, and promise the rest by Friday. She'd been making those promises for 6 months now. The men were getting impatient. Tonight the bakery was nearly empty. It usually was. A handful of customers had trickled in throughout the evening, a construction worker buying day-old donuts, a teenage couple sharing a coffee, an elderly man who nursed a single cup of tea for 2 hours because he had nowhere else to go. Lena didn't blame him. She didn't have anywhere else to go either. She wiped down the counter for the 3rd time, her movements mechanical. Her stomach twisted with hunger, a familiar companion she'd grown used to ignoring. There had been half a croissant in the kitchen earlier, something a customer had left on their plate, but Marcus, the line cook, had thrown it out before she could grab it. He didn't do it to be cruel, he just didn't notice. No one ever noticed Lena. The bell above the door chimed. Lena glanced up, ready to paste on the smile she'd perfected over years of customer service. It died on her lips. 3 men walked in, shaking rain from their coats. They moved with the kind of synchronized purpose that made Lena's instincts scream. The one in front was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone. The 2 behind him were younger, leaner, but no less dangerous. They didn't look at the menu board. They looked at her. "We're closing soon," Lena said, hating how small her voice sounded. The scarred man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "That's fine. We're not here for coffee." Lena's hands tightened on the rag she was holding. "My aunt isn't here." "We know." He stepped closer to the counter. "She's playing blackjack at the riverside. Down about $4,000 last I heard. Thought we'd come see if you had anything to contribute to her tab." "I don't," Lena swallowed. "I don't have anything. I told your guys on Friday." "That was Friday. This is Tuesday." The man leaned against the counter, his weight making it creak. "You know how interest works, sweetheart." She did. She knew exactly how it worked. Every late payment added another layer of debt. Another week of impossible calculations where she tried to figure out how to eat and pay rent and keep the lights on, and somehow scrape together enough to keep these men from doing whatever it was they did when the money ran out. "I get paid on Thursday," Lena said. It was a lie. She'd already spent Thursday's paycheck on this week's rent. "I can bring you something then." "Thursday," the man repeated. He looked at his companions. They didn't react. "You hear that? Thursday. Please." The word tasted like ash. "I just need a couple more days." The man's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air. One of the younger men moved to the door, flipping the sign from open to closed. The click of the lock sliding into place was the loudest sound Lena had ever heard. "Here's the thing about a couple more days," the scarred man said. We've given you a couple more days, a lot of them. Our boss is starting to think you're not taking this seriously. I am. I swear I'm. Then prove it. Lena's throat closed. She took a step back, her hip hitting the counter behind her. There was nowhere to go. Marcus had left an hour ago. The kitchen was empty. The street outside was deserted, rain-slicked and dark. She was alone with three men who had no reason to be gentle and every reason to make an example out of her. The scarred man reached into his jacket. Lena flinched. He pulled out a phone. I'm going to call my boss. You're going to explain to him why we shouldn't be having this conversation. Before Lena could respond, the bell above the door chimed again. Everyone froze. The lock was engaged. The door shouldn't have opened, but it had, and now there was a fourth man standing in the entrance, rain dripping from his dark coat onto the checkered tile floor. Lena's first thought was that he didn't belong here, not in this bakery, not on this street, not in this part of the city where everything was worn down and given up. He was too clean, too sharp, too expensive. His coat probably cost more than Lena made in 6 months. His shoes were leather, polished to a gleam that reflected the flickering fluorescent lights. His hair was black, pushed back from his face, and his eyes found hers, and Lena forgot how to breathe. They were dark. Not brown, not quite black, but something in between. The kind of eyes that didn't just look at you. They saw through you, past the surface, into all the parts you tried to keep hidden. Lena had spent her entire life being invisible, and in the span of a single glance, this man had made her feel like the only person in the room. We're closed, the scarred man said. His voice had changed. There was an edge to it now, something uncertain. The newcomer didn't acknowledge him. He walked to the counter, his movements unhurried, and stopped directly in front of Lena. Coffee, he said. His voice was low, calm, with an accent she couldn't place. Black. Lena stared at him. Her brain struggled to process the request. Coffee. He wanted coffee. As if three men hadn't just locked the door and cornered her, as if this were a normal night. We're closed, the scarred man repeated, louder this time. The newcomer finally turned his head. He didn't say anything. He just looked at the scarred man, and whatever the scarred man saw in that look made him take a step back. Black coffee, the newcomer said again, his attention returning to Lena. Please. Lena's hands shook as she reached for a cup. She didn't understand what was happening. The air in the bakery had shifted. The threat that had been pressing down on her moments ago suddenly redirected, hovering around the man in the expensive coat like a storm waiting to break. She poured the coffee. It sloshed over the rim, burning her fingers. She barely felt it. Are you all right? The man asked. Lena set the cup on the counter. Yes. It was a reflex, the answer she'd been trained to give. Yes, I'm fine. Yes, everything's okay. Yes, I can handle it. The lies she told herself to get through each day. The man picked up the cup. His fingers brushed hers, just barely, just enough for her to notice how steady his hands were compared to hers. He took a sip, his eyes never leaving her face. You're bleeding, he said. Lena looked down. There was a cut on her palm, a thin line where the edge of the coffee pot had caught her skin. She hadn't even noticed. Blood welled up, bright red against her pale skin, and dripped onto the counter. It's nothing, she said. Let me see. It wasn't a request. Lena hesitated, then held out her hand. The man set down his coffee and reached across the counter, taking her hand in his. His grip was firm, warm, and impossibly gentle. He examined the cut with the kind of focus most people reserved for things that actually mattered. It needs to be cleaned, he said. I'll do it later. You'll do it now. He released her hand and looked at the scarred man. Leave. The scarred man's jaw tightened. We're in the middle of... I know what you're in the middle of. The newcomer's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You're leaving, now. For a moment, Lena thought the scarred man would argue. His hand twitched toward his jacket, where she suspected he kept something more dangerous than a phone. But then one of the younger men put a hand on his shoulder and murmured something Lena couldn't hear. The scarred man's expression went blank. Yeah, he said. Yeah, we're leaving. They left. The bell chimed as the door swung shut behind them, and then it was just Lena and the stranger. Lena's legs felt weak. She leaned against the counter, her injured hand pressed to her chest. Who are you? The man picked up his coffee again. Someone who doesn't like seeing people get hurt in front of me. They weren't going to hurt me, weren't they? Lena didn't have an answer for that. The man took another sip of his coffee, then set the cup down with a soft clink. He reached into his coat. Lena tensed, but he just pulled out a wallet and placed several bills on the counter. Lena stared at them. There had to be at least $300 there. That's too much, she said. It's for the coffee, and your hand, and your trouble. I don't need… Yes, you do. The certainty in his voice made her chest tighten. She wanted to argue, to shove the money back at him and tell him she wasn't a charity case. But the weight of the bills on the counter, the knowledge of what they could buy, food, time, maybe even enough to keep the scarred man and his friends away for another week, kept her silent. Thank you, she whispered. The man inclined his head. What's your name? Lena hesitated. She'd learned not to give out personal information. It was safer to be no one, to disappear into the background. But something about the way he asked, like her name was important, like she was important, made her answer. Lena. Lena Park. Lena. He repeated it slowly, like he was testing how it felt. I'm Adrian. Adrian, she echoed. He smiled. It was a small smile, barely a curve of his lips, but it changed his entire face. For a moment, he didn't look like the kind of man who could make 3 dangerous men leave with a single word. He looked almost human. Take care of that hand, Lena Park, Adrian said. Then he turned and walked out into the rain. Lena stood behind his counter for a long time after he left, staring at the money he'd left behind. Her hand throbbed. The cut wasn't deep, but it stung. A reminder that she was still here, still standing, still alive. She locked the door, turned off the lights, and counted the money 3 times to make sure she hadn't imagined it. $340. Enough to buy groceries, enough to pay part of what she owed, enough to breathe for a little while. She walked home in the rain, her thin jacket soaked through by the time she reached the basement apartment she rented for $400 a month. It was small, cramped, and smelled like mold, but it was hers. She locked the door behind her, peeled off her wet clothes, and stood under the lukewarm spray of the shower until her fingers pruned. Adrian. She didn't know his last name. Didn't know where he'd come from or why he'd walked into the bakery at exactly the right moment. Didn't know why he'd looked at her like he could see every scar she carried. She told herself it didn't matter. People like him didn't exist in her world. He'd been passing through, a brief intersection of 2 lives that would never cross again. She almost believed it. The scarred man's name was Harris, and he was in a very bad mood. He sat in the back of a black sedan, rain drumming against the roof, and tried to figure out how to explain what had just happened to his boss. The problem was, he didn't entirely understand it himself. One minute, they'd been doing their job, leaning on a debtor, making sure the message was clear. The next, Adrian Voss had walked in, and the whole situation had gone sideways. Adrian Voss. Harris had only seen him once before from a distance, at a meeting between the families. Voss was young, mid-20s maybe, but he ran one of the most powerful operations in the city. He didn't make public appearances. He didn't need to. His reputation did the work for him. And now Harris had to explain why he'd walked away from a job because Voss had told him to. What do you want to do, one of the younger men asked from the front seat. Harris rubbed his face. Nothing. We do nothing. But the girl… Forget the girl. Forget the debt. We're done with that account. Boss isn't going to like that. Boss is going to like it a hell of a lot more than the alternative. Harris leaned back, closing his eyes. Trust me. What? Adrian Voss sat in the back of his own car, watching the rain blur the city lights into streaks of gold and red. His driver, a silent man named Miles, knew better than to ask questions. They'd been heading to a meeting on the north side when Adrian had seen the bakery. Small, unremarkable, the kind of place he'd normally drive past without a second thought. But he'd seen her through the window, Lena, 3 years. He'd been watching her for 3 years, ever since the night she'd stumbled out of a bus station with a duffel bag and a look of quiet desperation that had caught his attention in a way nothing else had. He'd made it his business to know everything about her, where she lived, where she worked, the aunt who dragged her into debt, the men who came to collect. He'd kept them at bay without her knowing. A word here, a payment there, just enough to keep her safe without interfering directly. He'd told himself it was enough, that watching from a distance, making sure she survived was all he needed. But tonight, seeing those men corner her, seeing the fear in her eyes, He'd walked into that bakery knowing it would change everything. "Sir?" Miles's voice was quiet. "The meeting?" "Cancel it," Adrian said. "Cancel it." "Yes." Miles didn't argue. He turned the car around, heading back toward Adrian's estate on the edge of the city. Adrian pulled out his phone and opened the folder he kept on Lena Park. Photos, reports, every detail of her life cataloged and stored. It should have felt invasive. It should have felt wrong. It felt necessary. He'd waited long enough. Lena didn't see Adrian again for 2 days. She worked her shifts, served her customers, and tried not to think about the man who'd left $300 on her counter. It was easier said than done. Every time the bell above the door chimed, her heart jumped, expecting to see him walk in. He never did. On the 3rd day, Aunt Claire showed up. Lena was restocking the pastry case when her aunt barged through the door, her face flushed, her hair a mess. Claire was 43 but looked older, worn down by years of bad decisions and worse luck. She grabbed Lena by the arm, her nails digging into skin. "What did you do?" Claire hissed. Lena pulled away. "What are you talking about?" "Harris. He called me. Said the debt's cleared. All of it. Said I don't owe anything anymore." Claire's eyes were wild. "What did you do?" Lena's stomach dropped. "I didn't." "Don't lie to me. Nobody just clears that kind of debt. What did you give them?" "Nothing." Lena's voice cracked. "I didn't do anything. I swear." Claire grabbed her again, shaking her. "You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know how this works? What did you promise them?" "Let go of me." The bell chimed. Claire released Lena so fast she stumbled. They both turned toward the door. Adrian stood in the entrance, rain dripping from his coat, his dark eyes locked on Claire. "You must be the aunt," he said. Claire's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Adrian stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He didn't look at Lena. His attention was entirely on Claire, and the weight of it made her shrink back. "My name is Adrian Voss," he said. "I paid your debt. All of it. You don't owe Harris. You don't owe anyone." Claire found her voice. "Why?" "Because your niece deserves better than to clean up your mistakes." The bluntness of it hit like a slap. Claire's face went red, then white. She looked at Lena, then back at Adrian. "What do you want?" Claire asked. Adrian smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "I want you to leave, now, and I want you to stay away from Lena unless she asks for you." "You can't just—" "I can." Adrian's voice was soft, almost gentle. "And I will. Leave." Claire left. Lena stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Adrian turned to her, and the hardness in his expression melted away. "Are you all right?" he asked. Lena shook her head. She wasn't all right. Nothing about this was all right. "Why did you do that?" "Because you needed help. I didn't ask for help." "I know. I don't even know you." Adrian took a step closer. Lena should have moved back. She didn't. "You will," he said. Dem. He didn't leave after that. He sat at one of the small tables near the window and ordered another black coffee. Lena made it with shaking hands, set it in front of him, and retreated behind the counter. He didn't speak. He just sat there reading something on his phone, like this was normal. Customers came and went. The rain didn't stop. Adrian stayed. When Lena's shift ended, she took off her apron and walked to his table. "You can't keep doing this." "Doing what?" "This. Showing up, paying my debts. I don't need—" "You were starving," Adrian said. Lena froze. "You were starving," he repeated, his voice calm. "You haven't eaten a full meal in weeks. You give half your paycheck to your landlord and the other half to men like Harris, and you live on scraps. Don't tell me you don't need help." Lena's throat burned. "How do you—" "I know a lot of things, Lena." Adrian stood, closing the distance between them. "I know you work 16-hour shifts. I know you sleep 4 hours a night. I know your aunt hasn't spoken to you in 6 months except to ask for money. I know you're alone." "Stop." "I know," Adrian continued, his voice dropping, "that you're stronger than anyone I've ever met. And I know you deserve more than this." Lena's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. "Why do you care?" Adrian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, He cupped her face in his hand. His palm was warm against her cheek. "Because I've been watching you for 3 years," he said, "and I'm done watching." The world tilted. Lena stared at him, her mind struggling to process the words. 3 years. He'd been watching her for 3 years. That should have terrified her. It should have sent her running. But all she felt was the warmth of his hand and the certainty in his eyes. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You will," Adrian said. "Come with me." "Where?" "Somewhere safe," Lena laughed. It came out broken, edged with hysteria. "I don't even know you." "Then get to know me." Adrian's thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I'm not going to hurt you, Lena. I'm never going to hurt you." She should have said no. Every instinct she had screamed at her to say no. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "Okay." Adrian smiled, and Lena Park's life changed forever. Adrian's car was nothing like Lena expected. She'd pictured something flashy, aggressive, the kind of vehicle men with money used to prove they had it. Instead, it was understated, sleek black with tinted windows, the interior leather soft enough that she was afraid to touch it with her work-stained hands. Miles drove without speaking. Adrian sat beside her in the back seat, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, but not touching her. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Lena watched the city blur past the window. They were heading west, away from the neighborhood she knew, past the industrial district, and into areas where the buildings grew taller and the streets grew cleaner. She'd lived in this city her whole life, but rarely ventured beyond a 5-mile radius of her apartment. There'd never been a reason to. "Where are we going?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "My home," Adrian said. Lena's hands twisted in her lap. "I can't just go to your home. I have work tomorrow. I have—" "You don't work there anymore." She turned to stare at him. "What?" "I bought the bakery this afternoon. You're released from your employment, effective immediately." The words hit her like cold water. You can't just buy a business because—" "I can. I did." Adrian's expression remained calm. "The building was already in foreclosure. Your aunt hadn't paid property taxes in 2 years. I paid what was owed and purchased the property outright." Lena's breath came faster. "So what? I'm just unemployed now? That's not helping me. You'll work for me." "Doing what?" "Whatever you want." The absurdity of it made her want to laugh or scream or both. "This is insane. You don't even know me." Adrian finally turned to look at her fully. In the dim light of the car, his eyes were almost black. "I know you better than you think." "That's not—" Lena stopped, frustration bubbling up. "That's not normal. You understand that, right? None of this is normal." "No," Adrian agreed. "It's not." At least he wasn't pretending otherwise. Lena pressed her palms against her thighs, trying to ground herself. "I should ask you to turn the car around. I should get out right now." "But you won't." "How do you know?" "Because you're curious." Adrian's voice softened. "Because you've spent your whole life surviving, and some part of you wants to know what it feels like to do more than that." He was right, and Lena hated that he was right. She stared at her reflection in the window, at the girl with hollow cheeks and tired eyes, wearing a uniform that smelled like old grease and stale coffee. When was the last time someone had seen her as more than an obstacle or a convenience? When was the last time anyone had looked at her the way Adrian did, like she mattered? 3 years, she said quietly. "You said you've been watching me for 3 years." "Yes." "Why?" Adrian was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight she didn't understand. "Because the first time I saw you, you were sitting on a bench outside the bus station at 2 in the morning. You were soaked from the rain, holding a duffel bag like it was the only thing keeping you anchored to the earth. And you were crying." Lena remembered that night. She'd just arrived in the city, 18 years old and running from a foster home that had been her 5th in 3 years. She'd had $200 in cash, a bag of clothes, and nowhere to go. "I watched you sit there for an hour," Adrian continued. "You cried for maybe 10 minutes. Then you stopped. You wiped your face, stood up, and started walking. You didn't know where you were going, but you went anyway. And I thought—" He paused. "I thought I'd never seen anyone so alone and so brave at the same time." Lena's chest felt too tight. "So you what? Decided to stalk me?" "I decided to make sure you survived." That's not your job. I made it my job. The certainty in his voice was unshakable. Lena wanted to be angry about it, about the violation of privacy, the presumption, the sheer arrogance of deciding her life was his concern. But underneath the anger was something else, something that felt dangerously like relief. I don't need a savior, she said. I'm not trying to save you. Adrian shifted in his seat, angling toward her. I'm trying to give you a choice you've never had before. What choice? To stop fighting alone. The car slowed, turning through a set of iron gates that opened automatically. Lena pressed her face to the window, her breath fogging the glass. The driveway stretched ahead, lined with trees whose branches hung heavy with rain. At the end of it sat a house that made her stomach drop. It wasn't a house. It was an estate. 3 stories of stone and glass, lit from within so that it glowed against the dark sky. Manicured gardens stretched out on either side. And even in the rain, Lena could see the careful design of it all. The hedge rows, the fountain in the center of the circular drive, the sculptures placed at precise intervals. You live here, she said dumbly. Yes. Alone? Mostly. There's staff, but they don't live on the property. The car stopped in front of the main entrance. Miles got out and opened Adrian's door, then moved to open Lena's. She climbed out on legs that felt unsteady, staring up at the building that loomed above her. Adrian appeared at her side. Come inside. She followed because she didn't know what else to do. The interior was worse. Polished marble floors reflected the light from a chandelier that probably cost more than Lena had earned in her entire life. A grand staircase curved upward to the second floor, the banister gleaming. Every surface looked like it had been chosen with care, arranged with precision. It was beautiful in a way that felt alien. This way? Adrian led her down a hallway to the left, his footsteps silent on the stone. They entered a room that turned out to be a library. Floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books, leather furniture arranged around a fireplace that crackled with real flames. Adrian gestured to one of the chairs. Sit, please. Lena sat. The leather was soft, enveloping. She perched on the edge, afraid to relax. Adrian moved to a cabinet in the corner and pulled out a bottle and 2 glasses. Do you drink? Not really. He poured anyway, bringing her a glass with amber liquid. Whiskey. It'll help with the shock. Lena took it, but didn't drink. Adrian sat across from her, cradling his own glass. Ask me questions, he said. What? You have questions. Ask them. Lena looked down at the whiskey, watching the firelight dance in it. How did you pay off the debts? Not just mine. My aunt's. That had to be $63,000. Adrian took a sip. I had my accountant wire the funds this morning. $63,000. Lena felt dizzy. And the bakery? Another $70,000 for the property, plus back taxes. That's over $100,000. Yes. On someone you don't know. On someone I do know. Adrian set his glass down. Lena, I've watched you for 3 years. I know you give your tips to the dishwasher because his wife is sick and he can't afford her medication. I know you buy day-old bread from the corner store because it's cheaper and you give half of it to the homeless man who sleeps in the alley behind your building. I know you've never missed a shift, even when you had the flu so badly you could barely stand. I know. Stop. Lena's hands shook, whiskey sloshed in her glass. Just stop. Adrian went quiet. This is insane, Lena said. You're telling me you've been, what, following me? Spying on me? Protecting you? That's the same thing. No, it's not. Adrian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Following you would be watching for my own benefit. I watched to keep you safe. From what? From men like Harris, from your aunt's creditors, from the landlord who tried to break into your apartment last year. Lena's blood went cold. How do you know about that? Because I made sure he never tried again. The fire crackled. Rain lashed against the windows. Lena stared at the man across from her, trying to reconcile what he was saying with any version of reality that made sense. You're scaring me, she whispered. Adrian's expression shifted, something like pain crossing his features. I don't want to scare you. That's the last thing I want. Then what do you want? He stood abruptly, crossing to the window. His back was to her, silhouetted against the rain-streaked glass. When he spoke, his voice was low. When I was 12, my father was killed, shot in our home while my mother and I hid in a closet upstairs. I heard every second of it, the shouting, the gunshots, the silence after. He paused. My mother sent me away the next day, to boarding school in Switzerland, then university in London. By the time I came back, she was dead too. Cancer, they said. I think it was grief. Lena's grip on the glass tightened. I inherited everything, Adrian continued. The business, the territory, the responsibilities. I was 22 years old and in charge of an organization I barely understood. People tested me, constantly. They thought I was weak because I was young, because I'd been away. What did you do? I proved them wrong. Adrian turned to face her. I learned how to be hard, how to make decisions that kept people in line, how to be feared. And that worked. It kept me alive. His eyes met hers. But it also meant I spent every day surrounded by people who wanted something from me. Loyalty, money, power. No one looked at me and saw anything other than what I could give them. He moved back to his chair, sitting down slowly. Then I saw you, and you didn't want anything. You were just... He gestured, searching for words. You were just trying to survive, and you were doing it alone with a kind of stubborn resilience that... He stopped. I couldn't look away. Lena's heart hammered. So you decided to watch me like some kind of experiment? No. I decided to make sure you didn't disappear. Adrian's voice roughened. Because the world has a way of swallowing people like you. People who are too tired to fight back, too invisible to be noticed when they're gone. And I couldn't... He cut himself off, jaw tight. I couldn't let that happen. The vulnerability in his admission cracked something open in Lena's chest. She took a small sip of the whiskey. It burned going down, settling warm in her stomach. This is still insane, she said. I know. And controlling. Yes. And I should probably run as far from you as I can get. Adrian nodded. Probably. But I'm not going to. Something flashed in his eyes. Relief, triumph, hunger. All three at once. No? Lena set down her glass. Not yet, anyway. I want to understand this first. Understand you. What do you want to know? Everything. She met his gaze. You said you'd been protecting me. How? Small interventions. Making sure your landlord didn't evict you when rent was late. Ensuring your aunt's creditors didn't escalate beyond threats. Once, a man followed you home from work. The guy in the red jacket. Lena remembered. 6 months ago, she'd noticed someone trailing her for 3 blocks. She ducked into a convenience store, and when she came out, he was gone. Miles intercepted him, Adrian said. Explained that following young women at night was a good way to end up in the river. Is Miles... Lena hesitated. Does he work for you? Like, really work for you? Miles is my head of security. He's been with me for 5 years. Security for what? Adrian's smile was humorless. I run a business, Lena. A very particular kind of business that requires careful management and occasionally aggressive problem solving. The implication settled over her. Lena had grown up in foster care, bounced between neighborhoods where people learn not to ask too many questions. She recognized the careful language, the things left unsaid. You're in the Mafia, she said flatly. That's a dramatic term. But accurate? Adrian tilted his head. I manage interests in this city. Import, export, real estate, entertainment. Some of it operates in areas the law doesn't reach. And the men who came to the bakery, Harris and his friends? They work for the Kozlov family, smaller operation, mostly loan sharking and protection rackets. We have an agreement not to interfere with each other's business. His eyes darkened. But your aunt became their client, which meant you became their problem. That violated our arrangement. So you what, called them off? I made it clear that collecting from you would be considered a personal offense. Lena stood, needing to move. She paced to the fireplace, staring into the flames. And they just listened? Just like that? They value their arrangement with me more than they value your aunt's debt. Because you're scarier than they are. Because I'm more powerful than they are, Adrian corrected. Fear is just a byproduct of power. She turned to look at him. He sat perfectly still, watching her with that same intense focus that made her feel like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. It should have been unnerving. Maybe it was, but it was also intoxicating in a way she didn't want to examine too closely. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends on you." "You said I'd work for you. Doing what?" Adrian stood, closing the distance between them. He stopped a foot away, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Whatever you want. If you want to manage one of my legitimate businesses, I can arrange that. If you want to go to school, I'll pay for it. If you want to do nothing but rest and recover from 3 years of barely surviving, that's fine too. And in exchange? In exchange, you stay here. You let me take care of you. You give me a chance to prove that this," he gestured between them, "that this isn't just obsession. What else would it be? Something real." Lena's breath caught. "You don't know me well enough for it to be real. Then let me know you better." Adrian's hand rose slowly, giving her time to pull away. His fingers brushed her cheek, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Stay. Give me a month. If at the end of it you want to leave, I'll set you up anywhere you want to go with enough money to start over. No strings, no obligations. And if I want to leave tomorrow? Then I'll drive you wherever you want to go." She should want to leave. This was textbook insanity. Accepting help from a man who'd admitted to watching her for years, who ran criminal enterprises, who'd upended her entire life without asking permission. Every self-preservation instinct she had screamed at her to say no. But the firelight was warm on her skin, and Adrian's hand was gentle against her face. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't feel alone. "1 month?" she heard herself say. Adrian smiled. It was small, private, like she'd given him something precious. 1 month. He dropped his hand and stepped back, giving her space. "You should eat. When was the last time you had a real meal?" Lena tried to remember and couldn't. "A while. Come with me." He led her down another hallway to a dining room that could have seated 20. A long table dominated the space, its surface polished to a mirror shine. Adrian pulled out a chair for her, then disappeared through a door that must have led to the kitchen. Lena sat alone in the enormous room, listening to the muffled sounds of Adrian moving around. This was her life now, apparently. Sitting in a mansion, waiting for a man she barely knew to make her dinner. The unreality of it made her head spin. Adrian returned carrying a tray. He set it in front of her, a sandwich, fruit, a glass of water. Simple food, but it looked like a feast. "I'm not much of a cook," he admitted, sitting beside her rather than at the far end of the table. "But I can manage basics." Lena picked up the sandwich. The bread was soft, fresh, real turkey, lettuce, tomato. Her hands trembled slightly as she raised it to her mouth. The first bite was perfect. The second made her eyes burn. Adrian didn't comment on the tears that slipped down her cheeks. He just handed her a napkin and let her eat in silence. She finished the entire sandwich and half the fruit before her stomach protested. She hadn't eaten that much at once in weeks. Adrian cleared the dishes, then returned with a different look in his eyes. "I need to show you something," he said. He led her upstairs, down a carpeted hallway lined with closed doors, to a room at the end. When he opened it, Lena's breath stopped. It was a bedroom, but not just any bedroom. The walls were painted a soft gray blue, the exact shade of twilight. A massive bed dominated the space, covered in white linens that looked cloud-soft. There was a reading chair by the window, a bookshelf filled with novels, a desk with fresh flowers in a vase. "This is for you," Adrian said quietly. Lena walked inside slowly, her footsteps silent on plush carpet. She ran her fingers over the bedspread, touched the spines of the books. Contemporary fiction, classics, poetry, her favorites. Things she'd mentioned wanting to read too. "How do you know what books I like?" she asked. "You used to browse the library sales on Sundays, before you started working double shifts." Right, because he'd been watching, learning her habits, her preferences, cataloging every detail. Lena turned to face him. "You planned this. You set up this room before you even talked to me." Adrian didn't deny it. "Yes, that's presumptuous, controlling, possibly unhinged." He stepped into the room. "But I hoped, and I wanted to be ready if you said yes." Lena stared at him, at the room he'd prepared, at the life he was offering, like a gift wrapped in red flags and genuine care. She should be angry. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt something dangerously close to grateful. "There's a bathroom through that door," Adrian continued, pointing. "Fully stocked with anything you might need. The closet has clothes. I had to guess your size, so if nothing fits, we'll get you new things tomorrow. You bought me clothes. Yes. This is insane, Lena said again, but the words had lost their heat. Adrian smiled slightly. You keep saying that because it keeps being true. Fair enough. He moved toward the door. My room is 3 doors down on the right. If you need anything at all, come find me. Adrian? He stopped, turning back. Lena swallowed hard. Thank you for the food and the room and... She gestured helplessly. All of it. His expression softened in a way that made him look younger, almost vulnerable. You don't have to thank me, Lena. Taking care of you isn't a favor. It's... He paused, searching for words. It's what I want to do. He left before she could respond, closing the door quietly behind him. Lena stood in the center of the room, her room, and tried to process the last 4 hours of her life. This morning, she'd woken up in a basement apartment with mold on the ceiling and $14 in her bank account. Now she was standing in a bedroom that probably cost more than she'd ever earn, wearing clothes that smelled like grease and rain, trying to understand how she'd ended up here. She moved to the bathroom. It was larger than her entire apartment had been. White marble, a shower with glass doors, a bathtub big enough to swim in. Toiletries lined the counter, expensive brands she recognized from store displays she'd never gotten close to. Shampoo, conditioner, body wash, lotion, all unopened, waiting for her. Lena turned on the shower and stripped off her uniform. She caught sight of herself in the mirror and barely recognized the girl looking back. Too thin, bruises on her arms from bumping into equipment at work, shadows under her eyes that had been there so long she'd forgotten what she looked like without them. The water was hot, perfect. She stood under the spray and let it wash away 3 years of exhaustion, cheap soap, and the constant grinding awareness that she was one missed paycheck away from losing everything. Except she'd already lost everything, and somehow, impossibly, ended up with more. She washed her hair twice, scrubbed her skin until it turned pink, and only got out when the water started to cool. The towels were thick, soft. She dried off and found a robe hanging on the back of the door, white, plush, with her initials embroidered on the chest. LP. He'd thought of everything. The closet was next. Adrian hadn't been exaggerating. There were clothes, dozens of them, jeans, sweaters, dresses, workout clothes, all in her size or close enough. Lena pulled on a pair of soft cotton pajama pants and a t-shirt that felt like wearing a cloud. She climbed into bed and sank into a mattress that seemed to embrace her. The pillows were perfect. The blankets were weighted just right. Everything was perfect, and that was what scared her most. Because people didn't do things like this without expecting something in return. In Lena's experience, kindness always came with a price tag, and Adrian Voss had just invested over $100,000 in her. What would he want when he came to collect? Sleep pulled at her despite the anxiety churning in her gut. She was so tired. Tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion, into her bones, her blood, her soul. She'd been tired for 3 years. Maybe longer, maybe forever. Her eyes drifted closed. Tomorrow she'd figure out what came next. Tomorrow she'd make sense of this. Tomorrow she'd decide if she was going to run or stay or do something in between. Tomorrow. Tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Lena Park was warm, fed, clean, and safe. She fell asleep before her next thought could form. Lena woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize. For a disorienting moment, she thought she was still dreaming, the soft sheets, the quiet, the absence of traffic noise and her neighbor's television bleeding through thin walls. Then memory crashed back, and with it, the full weight of what she'd agreed to. 1 month. She'd given Adrian Voss 1 month. She sat up, taking in the room in daylight. It looked even more carefully constructed than it had last night. The books were arranged by genre. The flowers on the desk were fresh peonies, her favorite, though she'd never told anyone that. The curtains were sheer enough to let in light, but thick enough to provide privacy. Every detail calibrated to comfort. Her stomach twisted. How much had he watched to know these things? How many hours had he spent learning her preferences, cataloging her habits, building this perfect cage? Except it didn't feel like a cage. That was the problem. It felt like the first safe place she'd had in years. Lena swung her legs out of bed and padded to the window. The estate stretched out below, manicured lawns, gardens still glistening with rain from the night before, a stone path winding toward what looked like a greenhouse in the distance. Beyond the property walls, she could see the city skyline, far enough away to seem like a different world. A soft knock on the door made her jump. Yes? It's Adrian. May I come in? Lena looked down at herself. Pajamas, hair probably a mess, no armor whatsoever. Give me a minute. She hurried to the bathroom, splashed water on her face, tried to tame her hair into something presentable. It didn't really work. She looked tired still, overwhelmed, like someone playing dress-up in a life too big for them. Okay, she called out. The door opened. Adrian stood in the doorway wearing dark jeans and a gray sweater that made him look less intimidating than he had in his coat and suit. Almost normal. Almost like someone she might have met under ordinary circumstances. Good morning, he said. Did you sleep? Yeah, better than I have in a long time. The admission felt too vulnerable, so she rushed past it. What time is it? Almost 11, Lena blinked. I slept for 12 hours? Your body needed it. Adrian stepped into the room but kept his distance, leaning against the doorframe. There's breakfast downstairs, or lunch, technically. Whatever you want to call it. You made food again? I had it brought in. I told you my cooking skills are limited. A slight smile. But I know people who are significantly more talented. Right. Because he had money. Enough money to pay off debts and buy buildings and apparently have meals catered at a moment's notice. The gap between their worlds felt impossibly wide. Lena followed him downstairs to the kitchen, a massive space with industrial-grade appliances and enough counter space to prepare meals for an army. Containers of food covered the island. Pastries, fruit, eggs, bacon, pancakes, enough for 10 people. This is too much, Lena said. I didn't know what you liked. Adrian pulled out a stool for her. So I got options. She sat, eyeing the spread. Her stomach growled despite her discomfort. Adrian noticed, of course. He noticed everything. Eat, he said gently. Please. You don't have to finish it all. Just eat what sounds good. Lena reached for a croissant. It was still warm, flaky, butter melting against her fingers. She took a bite and nearly moaned. When was the last time she'd had fresh pastry? When was the last time she'd had anything that wasn't stale or microwaved or scraped together from whatever she could afford? Adrian poured coffee, black for himself, with cream and sugar for her without asking how she took it, and sat across from her. He didn't eat, just watched her with that same intense focus that made her feel simultaneously seen and exposed. You're staring, Lena said around a mouthful of croissant. I know. It's weird. I know that too. But he didn't look away. Lena swallowed, took a sip of coffee. It was perfect. Of course it was. Can I ask you something? Anything. Last night you said you'd been protecting me, making sure landlords didn't evict me, keeping creditors away. But you also said you bought the bakery yesterday. So what changed? Why reveal yourself now instead of just continuing to watch from wherever you were watching from? Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. He set down his coffee cup with careful precision. Because watching you get cornered by Harris and his men made me realize something. What? That I was being selfish. I told myself I was protecting you, but really I was protecting myself from the risk of you rejecting me. As long as I stayed hidden, I couldn't be turned away. His eyes met hers. But seeing you trapped, scared, bleeding, I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep letting you struggle alone just because I was afraid of what might happen if I stepped into the light. The honesty of it hit Lena harder than she expected. She'd spent so long being lied to, by foster parents who promised stability, by social workers who swore the next place would be better, by her aunt who'd sworn she'd pay her back, that she'd forgotten what truth sounded like. And if I had said no, Lena asked, if I'd told you to leave me alone, then I would have left you alone. Adrian's voice was steady. I would have made sure your debts were still cleared, that you were safe. But I would have stayed away if that's what you wanted. You expect me to believe that? After you admitted to watching me for 3 years? I don't expect you to believe anything. I'm just telling you what's true. Lena took another bite of croissant, chewing slowly while she processed. You said I could work for you. What does that actually mean? It means whatever you want it to mean. Adrian leaned back. I own several legitimate businesses, restaurants, a few clubs, some real estate. If you want to manage one of them, learn the industry. I can arrange that. If you want to go to college, I'll pay tuition. If you want to do nothing for a while, that's fine too. And the not-so-legitimate businesses? You'll never be involved in those. That part of my life stays separate. Why? Because you deserve better than that world. His voice hardened slightly. I grew up in it. I don't have a choice. But you do. Lena set down the croissant, her appetite fading. What exactly do you do? In that world? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured. I control supply chains, imports and exports that don't always go through official channels. I manage territory agreements with other families. I ensure debts are paid and contracts are honored. Sometimes that requires negotiation. Sometimes it requires force. You hurt people. When necessary. Have you killed people? Yes. The single word hung between them. No justification, no softening, just the truth, blunt and unadorned. Lena's hands trembled. She clasped them together in her lap. And you're telling me I'm supposed to just be okay with that? No. I'm telling you who I am so you can make an informed decision about whether you want to stay. Adrian's expression didn't change. I won't lie to you, Lena. Not about this. I've done things that would horrify you. I'll probably do more. That's the reality of the life I lead. So why bring me into it at all? Because the alternative is watching you destroy yourself trying to survive on your own. And I can't do that anymore. He stood, moved to the window, his back to her. You asked what changed. That's what changed. I decided your safety was more important than my fear of rejection. Lena stared at his back, at the tension in his shoulders, the rigid line of his spine. He was giving her an out. Being honest about the darkness in his life, making sure she understood what she'd be agreeing to if she stayed. Most men in his position would lie, would paint themselves in softer colors to keep her compliant. Adrian was daring her to leave. And perversely, that made her want to stay. I need to see it, she said. Adrian turned. See what? Your world. The real one. Not just the nice house and the catered breakfasts. If I'm going to make a decision about staying, I need to understand what I'm actually dealing with. No? You said I could ask for anything, and I'm saying no to this. Adrian's voice was firm. That world is dangerous, Lena. People die in it. People disappear. I'm not exposing you to that. You're already exposing me to it by bringing me here. Lena stood, meeting his gaze. Everyone who knows you now knows about me, right? I'm a potential weakness, a target. Adrian's expression went cold. Anyone who touches you will regret it. That's not the point. The point is I'm already involved whether you like it or not. So I'd rather understand what I'm involved in than be kept in the dark and vulnerable. They stared at each other across the kitchen, the air crackling with tension. Adrian's jaw worked like he was physically restraining himself from arguing further. One meeting, he finally said. Tonight. You'll stay close to me, you'll do exactly what I say, and if I tell you we're leaving, we leave. No arguments. Okay? I'm serious, Lena. This isn't negotiable. I said okay. Adrian studied her for another long moment, then nodded once. Fine, we leave at 8. The rest of the day passed in a strange sort of limbo. Adrian had work to do, phone calls in his office, a video conference that lasted 2 hours, and Lena was left to explore the house. It was even bigger than she'd realized. Multiple living rooms, a formal dining room, the library she'd seen last night, a gym that looked like it belonged in a professional facility, and an indoor pool she found by accident while getting lost on the second floor. She ended up back in the library, pulling books off shelves at random. Adrian had eclectic taste, philosophy next to thriller novels, history books beside poetry. She found a worn copy of Jane Eyre and settled into one of the leather chairs. She'd read maybe 3 chapters when Adrian appeared in the doorway. I have to go out for a few hours, he said. Will you be all right here alone? Lena looked up from the book. Where are you going? Business. Nothing dangerous, just meetings. I'll be back by 6. And I just stay here? You can go anywhere in the house or on the grounds. There's food in the kitchen. Help yourself to whatever you want. If you need anything, there's a phone in every room. Dial 0. It'll reach Miles. Miles lives here? In the guest house on the east side of the property. He's my security, remember? He's always close. The reminder that she was being watched, protected, Adrian would say, made her skin prickle. But she nodded. Okay, I'll be fine. Adrian hesitated like he wanted to say something else. Then he just nodded and left. Lena listened to his footsteps fade, the distant sound of a car engine starting, then silence. She was alone in a mansion that probably cost more than some small towns. She could leave right now, walk out the front door, call a cab, disappear before Adrian came back. She didn't move. Instead, she kept reading. Lost herself in the story of another girl trapped in a strange house, trying to figure out the mysterious man who'd brought her there. The parallels weren't lost on her. Adrian returned at 6:30, looking tired. He found her still in the library, 3 books deep into a pile she'd accumulated. "Find anything interesting?" he asked. "Your taste in literature is weird. You've got Dostoevsky next to Agatha Christie." "I like crime," Adrian said with a slight smile. "Fictional and otherwise." "That's deeply unsettling." "I know." He glanced at his watch. "You should get ready. We need to leave in an hour." "Ready how? What am I supposed to wear to whatever this is?" "Something nice but understated. There should be options in your closet." Right. The closet full of clothes he'd bought for her. Lena went upstairs and rifled through the options. She settled on black pants and a deep green blouse that felt more adult than anything she'd worn in years. Simple jewelry, studs in her ears, a thin bracelet. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the girl looking back. Clean, rested, well-fed, wearing clothes that actually fit. She looked almost normal. Adrian was waiting in the foyer when she came down. He'd changed into a black suit, crisp white shirt, no tie. He looked dangerous again, the softness from this morning replaced with the hard edges of the man who could make people disappear with a word. His eyes traveled over her slowly. "You look beautiful." Lena's cheeks heated. "It's just clothes." "It's not the clothes." He offered his arm. "Ready?" She took it, and they walked to the car. The drive took 40 minutes, heading into the industrial district on the city's south side. Warehouses and shipping containers lined the streets, everything gray and utilitarian. Miles pulled up to a building that looked abandoned. Broken windows, graffiti on the walls, weeds growing through cracks in the concrete. "This is it?" Lena asked. "This is it." Adrian helped her out of the car. "Stay close. Don't speak unless spoken to. If anything feels wrong, you tell me immediately." "You're scaring me again." "Good. You should be a little scared. It'll keep you alert." But his hand found hers, squeezing gently. "I won't let anything happen to you." They entered through a side door. Inside, the building had been gutted and converted into something else entirely. The main floor was open, concrete and exposed beams, with a makeshift conference table in the center. Men stood around it, 6 of them, all wearing suits, all watching Adrian with varying degrees of deference and calculation. Miles took up position by the door. Adrian led Lena to a chair against the wall, away from the table. "Sit here," he murmured. "Don't move unless I come get you." Lena sat. Adrian joined the men at the table. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying authority, "let's begin." What followed was 90 minutes of the most surreal experience of Lena's life. The men discussed territory disputes, shipment schedules, payoff structures, and enforcement protocols like they were talking about quarterly earnings and market projections. Adrian ran the meeting with calm efficiency, making decisions that affected thousands of dollars and dozens of lives with barely a pause. A younger man, maybe 30, with slicked back hair and an expensive watch, challenged one of Adrian's rulings. "That's not how we agreed to split the harbor contracts," the man said. "The agreement was made before your family lost the dockworkers' union support," Adrian replied. "Circumstances changed. The split changes with it." "That's not fair." "Fair isn't relevant. What's relevant is maintaining stability and ensuring everyone gets a return on their investment. You lost leverage. Your percentage reflects that." The young man's face reddened. "My father won't accept this." "Your father isn't here. You are, and you'll accept it, or you'll find yourself without a seat at this table at all." Adrian's voice never rose, but something in it made the room go quiet. "Do we have an understanding?" The young man swallowed. "Yes." "Good." The meeting continued. Lena watched Adrian work, saw the way the other men deferred to him even when they clearly didn't want to. He wasn't the oldest person at the table or the loudest, but he was undeniably in charge, and everyone there knew it. Finally, they wrapped up. The men filed out in ones and twos until it was just Adrian, Miles, and Lena remaining. Adrian came to her, his expression softening slightly. "Are you all right?" That was... Lena searched for words. Intense. That was mild. He helped her stand. Most meetings are far more contentious. You didn't raise your voice once. I don't need to. Adrian guided her toward the door. Power isn't about volume. It's about certainty. They were halfway to the car when the gunshot rang out. Adrian moved so fast Lena didn't process it until she was on the ground, his body covering hers, the concrete scraping her palms. More gunshots. 3, 4, she lost count. Miles was returning fire, the sound deafening in the enclosed space between buildings. "Stay down," Adrian hissed in her ear. His weight pressed her flat, protective, and immovable. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but feel the sharp bite of concrete and the heat of Adrian's body and the terror of realizing she might die here, in an alley, because she'd asked to see his world. The shooting stopped as abruptly as it started. Adrian shifted, looking up. "Clear?" "Clear," Miles called back. "2 shooters, both down." Adrian hauled Lena to her feet. His hands ran over her arms, her shoulders, her face, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt?" I don't think so." Her voice shook. "What happened?" "Someone took a shot at me." Adrian's expression was murderous. "Get in the car, now." Miles had the door open. Adrian practically threw Lena inside, then climbed in after her. The car peeled out before the door fully closed. Lena's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She pressed them against her thighs, trying to still the tremors, but it didn't work. Adrenaline flooded her system, making everything too bright, too loud, too real. "Breathe," Adrian said. His hand covered hers. "Lena, breathe." She sucked in air, ragged and desperate. "You said this was just a meeting. It was supposed to be. Someone just tried to kill you." "I know." Adrian's jaw was tight. "I'm sorry. I should have anticipated this." "How could you anticipate someone shooting at you?" "Because it happens." He pulled her against him, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "It's part of the life. People challenge, people push back. Usually not with guns, but sometimes." Lena's whole body trembled. She buried her face against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her cheek. He'd covered her body with his, taken the risk himself. He could have been shot, could have been killed, and his first instinct had been to protect her. "This is insane," she whispered against his shirt. "I know." His hand stroked her hair. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." They drove in silence, Adrian holding her while she shook apart and slowly pieced herself back together. By the time they reached the estate, Lena had stopped trembling but felt hollowed out, scraped raw. Adrian helped her inside, guided her to the library, poured her whiskey. She actually drank this time. The burn helped, grounded her. "I need to make some calls," Adrian said. "Find out who ordered the hit. Miles will stay with you." "No." Adrian paused. "No? Don't leave me alone right now." Lena set down the glass. "Please." Something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe, or gratitude. He pulled out his phone, made 3 quick calls right there in the library while Lena listened. The conversations were terse, coded. By the 3rd one, she gathered that the shooters had been hired by the young man from the meeting, the one who'd challenged Adrian's decision. "Handle it," Adrian said into the phone and disconnected. He sat beside her on the couch, not touching, just close, present. "What happens now?" Lena asked. "To the guy who sent them. He'll be dealt with." Meaning his family will remove him from any position of authority, and he'll spend the next decade doing the kind of work that ensures he never forgets why challenging me was a mistake. "You're not going to kill him?" Killing him would start a war with his family. This way, they handle it internally, maintain the peace, and everyone learns a valuable lesson about consequences. Adrian's voice was matter-of-fact. Death isn't always the answer. Sometimes, humiliation is more effective. Lena absorbed that, the cold calculation of it, the way Adrian weighed outcomes like variables in an equation. This was the world she'd asked to see. Brutal, pragmatic, governed by rules she didn't fully understand. "You still want to leave?" Adrian asked quietly. Lena looked at him. His hair was disheveled from the fight, his suit jacket torn at the shoulder. But his eyes were steady, waiting for her answer without trying to influence it. She should want to leave. Tonight proved how dangerous his life was, how easily she could be caught in crossfire, how different their worlds were. But he'd covered her body with his, taken the risk himself. And now he was sitting here, giving her the choice, making no apologies for who he was, but also not forcing her to accept it. "No," Lena said. "I don't want to leave." Adrian's eyes closed briefly, like she'd given him something precious. When he opened them again, there was heat there, intensity that made her breath catch. "Why?" he asked. "Because you jumped in front of a bullet for me. Because you're honest about the terrible things you do instead of pretending to be something you're not. Because—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "Because what?" "Because I've been invisible my whole life, and you see me." Lena's voice dropped to a whisper. "No one's ever really seen me before." Adrian reached out slowly, cupping her face in his hand. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, gentle, despite the violence he was capable of. "I see you," he said. "I've always seen you." He kissed her then. Soft at first, questioning. Lena froze for a heartbeat, then kissed him back, and it was like something inside her that had been locked tight for years finally opened. His hand slid into her hair, and she gripped his jacket, pulling him closer, needing the solid reality of him after the terror of those gunshots. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said. "Not for a month. Stay." "Adrian, I know it's too fast. I know I'm asking for more than I have any right to, but stay. Let me prove this is real." Lena's heart pounded. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was crazy, that she barely knew him, that his world was dangerous and dark, and she should run while she still could. But she'd been running her whole life, from foster homes, from debt, from anything that looked like it might hurt her. And where had it gotten her? Alone, starving, invisible. Adrian was dangerous, his world was violent, but he saw her, and maybe that was worth the risk. "Okay," she whispered, "I'll stay." Adrian kissed her again after she agreed to stay, slower this time, like he was memorizing the shape of her mouth, the taste of her. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were dark with something that made Lena's stomach flip. "You should rest," he said, his voice rough. "It's been a long night." Lena didn't want to rest. She wanted to stay here in this moment where everything felt simple, just her and Adrian and the choice she'd made. But exhaustion was already pulling at her, the adrenaline crash hitting hard. "Will you—" She stopped, feeling foolish. "What? Will you stay with me? Just until I fall asleep?" Adrian's expression softened. "Yes." He walked her upstairs, his hand at the small of her back. In her room, Lena changed in the bathroom while Adrian waited, and when she emerged in pajamas, he was sitting in the reading chair by the window, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up. He looked more human like this. Tired, real. Lena climbed into bed and Adrian stayed in the chair, watching her with that same unwavering focus. "You're staring again," she murmured. "I know. Still weird. Still don't care." But there was warmth in his voice, affection that made her chest tight. Lena's eyes drifted shut. The last thing she remembered was the sound of Adrian's breathing, steady and close, and the feeling that for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. The next 3 weeks unfolded in a pattern Lena hadn't known was possible. Adrian kept his word about not forcing anything. He gave her space, let her explore the estate, never pushed her into decisions she wasn't ready for. But he was always there, present, attentive in ways that should have felt suffocating but somehow didn't. Mornings, they had breakfast together. Adrian would cook simple things, eggs, toast, fruit, and they'd sit in the kitchen talking about nothing important. Books she was reading, news he'd seen, small pieces of their lives exchanged like gifts. Afternoons, Adrian worked. Sometimes in his office, sometimes gone for hours to meetings Lena didn't ask about. She filled the time reading, exploring the grounds, once spending an entire afternoon in the greenhouse discovering that Adrian grew orchids. Dozens of them, meticulously cared for, each one labeled with its species and care requirements. "You garden?" she'd asked that evening, incredulous. "It's methodical, calming." Adrian had shrugged. "Everything in my work is chaos and negotiation. Plants just need consistency." That's weirdly wholesome for someone who runs a criminal empire. Even criminals need hobbies. Evenings were her favorite. Adrian would finish work and find her wherever she'd settled, the library, the pool, once on the back terrace watching the sunset. They'd have dinner together, and afterward they'd talk, really talk. Adrian told her about growing up in boarding school, how lonely it had been, how he'd learned to read people because it was the only way to survive. Lena told him about foster care, the families who'd kept her for the monthly check and nothing else. The social workers who'd stopped seeing her as a person and started seeing her as a case file. "Did you ever try to run away?" Adrian asked one night. "Twice. Got caught both times and sent somewhere worse." Lena pulled her knees to her chest. They were in the library, fire crackling, rain pattering against the windows. "After that, I just waited, counted down the days until I aged out. And then you came here, to this city. It was far enough from where I'd been, big enough to disappear in." She picked at the fringe on a throw pillow. "I thought if I could just get somewhere new, start over, everything would be different." But it wasn't. No. Turned out being alone in a new city was just as hard as being alone anywhere else. Maybe harder, because at least before I'd had the excuse that I was stuck. Here, I chose to come, and I was still failing. Adrian moved from his chair to sit beside her on the couch. "You weren't failing. You were surviving impossible circumstances." "Barely. Barely is still succeeding." His hand found hers. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for." Lena looked at their intertwined fingers. Adrian's hands were larger, calloused in places, bearing small scars she'd noticed but never asked about. Evidence of violence she'd witnessed firsthand that night in the alley. But his touch was always gentle with her, careful, like she was something precious. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always." "That night, when you covered me, were you scared?" Adrian was quiet for a moment, terrified. The admission surprised her. "You didn't seem scared." "Because I couldn't afford to be. If I'd frozen, we both might have died." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But yes, I was scared. Not of dying, but of failing to protect you." "Why does it matter so much? Protecting me?" "Because—" Adrian stopped, jaw working. "Because you matter to me, more than anything else in my life. The thought of you getting hurt because of me, because I brought you into this world." He cut himself off, shaking his head. Lena shifted closer, resting her head on his shoulder. He tensed briefly, then relaxed, his arm coming around her. They sat like that for a long time, watching the fire burn down to embers, neither of them speaking because words felt unnecessary. But not everything was simple. There were moments when the reality of Adrian's world crashed through the careful bubble they'd built. Like the afternoon Lena answered his phone by accident. It had been on the kitchen counter, ringing insistently, and she'd picked it up without thinking. "Adrian's phone," she'd said. Silence on the other end. Then a man's voice, cold and assessing. "Who is this?" "I'm—" Lena had frozen, realizing her mistake. "Is this important? I can get him—" "Tell Adrian that Kozlov called. Tell him we need to discuss the girl." The line went dead. When Adrian came down 20 minutes later, Lena was still standing in the kitchen, phone clutched in her hand. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. "Someone called, Kozlov. He said—" Her voice shook. "He said you need to discuss the girl. He meant me, didn't he?" Adrian's expression went hard. He took the phone from her gently, set it aside, then cupped her face in his hands. "Yes, he meant you. What does he want?" "To test boundaries. To see if you're a weakness he can exploit." Adrian's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "He won't touch you. I'll make sure of it." "How?" "By reminding him what happens to people who threaten what's mine." The possessiveness in his tone should have bothered her. A month ago it would have. But now, after 3 weeks of Adrian proving over and over that his protection wasn't about control but care, it just made her feel safe. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know, but Kozlov is a coward. He makes threats because he doesn't have the power to do anything else." "I'll handle it." He did. Lena didn't know the details, but 2 days later, Miles mentioned in passing that the Kozlov family had publicly apologized for overstepping and offered Adrian a significant concession on territory disputes. Whatever Adrian had done, it had worked, but the incident left Lena shaken. She'd been living in a fantasy, pretending that Adrian's world was something she could exist beside without being touched by it. That phone call proved otherwise. She was already a target, already a piece on the board. Adrian found her that evening in the greenhouse, sitting among the orchids, trying to calm the anxiety churning in her stomach. "You're thinking too much," he said, sitting beside her on the bench. "Someone threatened me because of you. Someone threatened you because they're trying to get to me. There's a difference." "Is there?" Lena turned to look at him. "Either way, I'm in danger." "You were already in danger before you met me. Different kind, maybe, but just as real." Adrian's voice was matter of fact. "At least now you have someone protecting you." "What if your protection isn't enough?" "It will be." No hesitation. "I have resources, people, influence. Anyone who comes after you will regret it." "That's not—" Lena stopped, frustrated. "You can't just fix everything with power and threats." "Why not? It's worked so far." "Because I'm not another business deal. I'm a person, and people are complicated, and you can't just—" She stood, pacing between the orchid tables. "What happens when the next Kozlov calls? When someone decides the best way to hurt you is through me? How many times can you make examples of people before someone gets through?" Adrian stood too, blocking her path. "As many times as it takes." "That's not sustainable." "Then what do you want me to do?" For the first time, there was frustration in his voice. "Walk away? Let you go back to starving in that apartment, working yourself to death for people who don't care if you live or die? I want you to acknowledge that this is hard, that being with you means constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if today's the day someone decides I'm a liability worth eliminating." Lena's voice cracked. "I want you to stop pretending that your love is enough to keep me safe." The word hung between them. Love. She'd said it without meaning to, without thinking, and now it was out there and she couldn't take it back. Adrian stared at her, something raw and unguarded in his expression. "Is that what you think this is?" "I don't know what this is." Lena wrapped her arms around herself. "You've been watching me for 3 years. You've spent a fortune on me. You've rearranged your entire life to accommodate me. If that's not love, then what is it?" "It's—" Adrian ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling. "It's more than that. Love is something that happens between equals, people who choose each other freely. But I chose you before you even knew I existed. I shaped circumstances to bring you here. How is that fair? How is that anything but obsession?" "So you don't love me?" "I didn't say that." Adrian closed the distance between them. "I'm saying I don't know if what I feel qualifies as love or something darker. I look at you and I want to give you everything. I want to destroy anyone who hurts you. I want to keep you safe and happy and with me, and I don't care what I have to do to make that happen. If that's love, fine. But it feels bigger than that, more consuming." Lena's heart hammered. "That's terrifying." "I know. And you're just admitting it? Not even trying to make it sound better?" "I promise not to lie to you." Adrian's hand came up, hesitating before touching her cheek. "I'm fucked up, Lena. I've known that since I was 12 years old, listening to my father die. Normal people don't feel things the way I do. They don't fixate. They don't watch someone for 3 years and call it protection. But this is what I have to offer. All of it. The protection, the obsession, the violence, the wealth, the dark parts, and the ones that try to be good. Take it or leave it, but know that it's real." Lena closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "What if I can't handle it?" "Then you tell me, and we figure something else out." "What if there is no something else? What if the only options are stay and be constantly afraid, or leave and lose this?" "Then you choose." Adrian's voice softened. "I'll hate it if you leave. I'll probably make sure you're still protected from a distance because I can't help myself. But I won't force you to stay somewhere that makes you miserable." Lena opened her eyes. Adrian was watching her with that same intensity, but underneath it was vulnerability she'd never seen before. He was scared. Scared she'd leave, scared he'd proven too dark for her to accept, scared that being honest had finally pushed her away. She kissed him. Adrian froze for a heartbeat, then kissed her back with a desperation that stole her breath. His hands tangled in her hair, and she gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, needing the solid reality of him. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Lena pressed her forehead to his chest. "I'm not leaving," she whispered. "You should. Probably, but I'm not." She looked up at him. Because you're right. Before you, I was drowning. Slowly, invisibly, but drowning. And yes, being with you is scary and dangerous and probably insane. But at least I'm not drowning anymore. Adrian's arms came around her, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. I'll keep you safe, I swear. I know you'll try. Lena let herself sink into his embrace. Just don't lie to me about the risks. Don't pretend it's safer than it is. I won't. They stood there in the greenhouse, surrounded by orchids and the smell of earth, holding each other while rain drummed on the glass roof. It wasn't a perfect resolution. The danger was still real, the threat still present. But they'd named it now, acknowledged it, and Lena felt steadier for the honesty. The next week, Adrian took her to dinner at one of his restaurants, an upscale Italian place downtown with exposed brick and candles on every table. Lena wore a dress from the closet, dark blue and elegant, and felt like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. You look beautiful, Adrian said as they were seated. You always say that. Because it's always true. He ordered wine without looking at the menu, clearly familiar with the place. The meal was perfect. Fresh pasta, wine that tasted expensive, dessert that melted on her tongue. Around them, other diners ate and talked, completely unaware that the man sitting across from Lena controlled half the city's underground. Does it ever feel strange, Lena asked, living two lives like this? What do you mean? This, she gestured around them. The nice restaurant, the legitimate businesses, and then the other parts, the violence and territory disputes and everything else. Adrian considered. Not strange, necessary. The legitimate side funds the other operations, provides cover. And honestly, I enjoy parts of it. Building something that lasts, that employs people, that serves a purpose beyond profit. But you could just do that. Just run restaurants and real estate and be normal. I could. But I'd still have enemies, still have rivals who'd see any weakness as an opportunity. The only difference would be that I'd have no way to defend myself. He took a sip of wine. Power isn't something you can just opt out of once you have it. You either maintain it or lose it, and losing it means becoming vulnerable. So you're trapped. We're all trapped by our choices. I've just made mine with open eyes. The conversation was interrupted by a man approaching their table, older, gray-haired, wearing an expensive suit. He smiled at Adrian with the kind of warmth that didn't reach his eyes. Adrian, good to see you. Castellano. Adrian's tone was neutral. Enjoying your meal? Very much. I didn't know you were seeing anyone. The man's gaze slid to Lena, assessing. You must be special to get Adrian's attention. Lena's stomach tightened. There was something calculating in the way he looked at her, like she was a piece of information worth cataloging. This is Lena, Adrian said. His hand found hers on the table, a clear signal. Lena, this is Vincent Castellano. We do business occasionally. Charming to meet you. Castellano's smile widened. I hope Adrian is treating you well. He is, Lena managed. Good, good. Well, I won't interrupt your evening. Adrian, we should talk soon, about the harbor situation. I'll have my people reach out. Castellano nodded and left. Lena watched him return to his own table, where two younger men sat watching their conversation with interest. Who was that? She asked quietly. Someone who now knows you exist and will use that information however benefits him most. Adrian's jaw was tight. I'm sorry. I should have anticipated he'd be here. What will he do with it? The information? Depends on what he wants from me. If he needs a favor, you might become leverage. If he wants to destabilize my position, you might become a target. Adrian's hand squeezed hers. Either way, I'll handle it. Lena's appetite disappeared. She pushed her dessert away, suddenly feeling exposed. Every person in this restaurant could be a threat, an observer, someone gathering intelligence. I want to go home, she said. Adrian signaled for the check immediately. The drive back was quiet. Lena stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past, feeling the weight of what her life had become. She'd traded one kind of invisibility for another. Before, no one saw her because she didn't matter. Now, people saw her because she mattered to Adrian, which made her a tool to be used against him. At the estate, she went straight to her room. Adrian followed, hovering in the doorway. Talk to me, he said. I don't know what to say. Lena sat on the bed, suddenly exhausted. Every time I think I'm adjusting, something happens that reminds me how out of my depth I am. You're not out of your depth. You're learning a new environment. Learning how to be a target, you mean? Adrian crossed to her, kneeling in front of the bed so they were eye level. Yes, learning how to navigate a world where people will use you to get to me. It's not fair, and I hate that this is your reality now. But you're stronger than you think. You've survived worse. Have I? Because this feels pretty bad. You survived being alone. Completely alone. With no one protecting you, no resources, nothing but your own will to keep going. His hands covered hers. This is different. You have me now. You have protection, resources, people who will move heaven and earth to keep you safe. That's not nothing. Lena looked at him. This man who'd upended her life, who'd watched her from shadows and pulled her into danger and somehow made her feel safer than she'd ever felt. What if loving you destroys me? Then I'll put you back together. Adrian's voice was fierce. As many times as it takes. I know it's not a real answer. I know it doesn't fix the fundamental problem, but it's all I have. His hands tightened on hers. You're the only thing in my life that feels real, Lena. Everything else is strategy and power plays and carefully maintained images. But you're real, and I will do everything in my power to keep you safe, even if that means keeping you safe from me. What does that mean? It means if you want to leave, I'll help you disappear. New city, new identity, enough money to start over properly. No one would find you, including me. Lena's throat tightened. You'd let me go? Just like that? If it meant you'd be safe and happy? Yes. Adrian's eyes were dark with emotion. I'm selfish, Lena. Obsessive. I want you with me more than I want almost anything, but I want you alive and whole more than I want you with me. So if leaving is what's best for you, then I'll help you do it. The offer sat between them, enormous and terrifying. A way out. A real one. Not conditional on her fighting for it or earning it. Just freedom, if she wanted it. Lena leaned forward, pressing her lips to Adrian's forehead. He went still beneath her touch. I'm not leaving, she said against his skin. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. I'm staying. Why? Because leaving would be the smart thing to do, and I'm tired of only doing smart things. I'm tired of surviving and never living. She pulled back to look at him. I want to live, even if it's scary, even if it's dangerous. I want to try. Adrian's expression cracked open, vulnerability spilling through. He stood, pulling her up with him, and kissed her like she was oxygen, and he'd been suffocating. Lena kissed back with equal desperation, her hands fisting in his shirt, and when they finally broke apart, both were shaking. Stay with me tonight, Lena whispered. Actually, stay. Don't go to your room. Lena, please, I don't want to be alone. Adrian searched her face. Whatever he saw there made him nod. Okay. They lay in her bed, clothes on, Adrian's arm around her while Lena pressed against his side. It was intimate without being sexual, close without crossing lines Lena wasn't ready to cross yet. Adrian's heartbeat was steady beneath her ear, and his hand traced slow patterns on her shoulder. Thank you, she said into the darkness. For what? For offering to let me go, even though you didn't want to. Loving someone means wanting what's best for them, even when it hurts. Adrian's voice was quiet. Even when it tears you apart. Is that what this is? Love? Yes. No hesitation this time. I love you. However dark or twisted or consuming that love might be, it's real. Lena's eyes burned. No one had ever said those words to her before. Not her foster parents, not her aunt, not anyone. She'd gone 21 years believing she was fundamentally unlovable, too damaged or difficult or invisible to matter to anyone. And here was Adrian, who'd watched her for 3 years, who'd learned her favorite books, and how she took her coffee, and the way she chewed her lip when she was anxious, who'd paid her debts, and built her a room, and offered her freedom even though it would destroy him to lose her. I think I love you too, she whispered. I'm not sure what that means yet, or if it's healthy, or if we're both just completely insane, but I feel something for you that I've never felt for anyone else. Adrian's arm tightened around her. He didn't say anything, just held her closer, and Lena let herself sink into the warmth of being held, being seen, being loved, however imperfectly. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, and for the first time since everything had changed, Lena dreamed of something other than drowning. Morning came too soon. Lena woke to find Adrian already awake, watching her with that familiar intensity that no longer felt invasive but grounding. His hand was still on her shoulder, fingers tracing idle patterns like he'd been doing it for hours. "How long have you been awake?" she asked, voice rough with sleep. "A while." "And you just watched me sleep?" "I did." No apology in his tone. "I wanted to make sure you were real, that last night actually happened." Lena shifted to face him fully. In the morning light, Adrian looked softer somehow. His hair was messy, his jaw shadowed with stubble, his guard completely down. This was the version of him no one else got to see, unpolished, vulnerable, human. "I'm real," she said, "and last night happened." "Good." Adrian's thumb brushed her cheekbone. "Because I meant every word." They stayed in bed another hour, talking about nothing important, and Lena realized this was what she'd been missing her whole life. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts, but this, quiet intimacy, someone who wanted to hear her thoughts about the book she was reading, who laughed when she made fun of his terrible taste in morning television. When they finally went downstairs, Miles was in the kitchen looking grim. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. Adrian's entire demeanor shifted. "What kind of problem?" "Castellano's been making calls to the other families. He's suggesting that your judgment is compromised because of—" Miles glanced at Lena, then back to Adrian. "Because of personal entanglements." "Say it plainly," Adrian said, voice hard. "He's telling people that Lena makes you weak, that you're distracted. He's pushing for a vote of no confidence." Lena's stomach dropped. She'd met Castellano once, for less than 5 minutes, and he'd already weaponized her existence. "What does that mean?" she asked. "A vote of no confidence?" "It means the other families can call a council and decide whether I'm still fit to maintain my position," Adrian said, his jaw tight. "If they vote against me, I lose territory, influence, protection, everything I've built. Because of me. Because Castellano is an opportunistic bastard who's been looking for a weakness to exploit for years." Adrian turned to Miles. "How much support does he have?" 3 families are listening. 2 are firmly with you. The rest are waiting to see which way the wind blows. So we need to prove I'm not compromised. Or prove that Lena isn't a weakness," Miles said carefully. Adrian's expression went cold. "She's not a weakness. I know that. You know that. But they need to see it." Miles looked at Lena. "No offense?" "None taken," Lena said, though her hands were shaking. "What do they want? Proof that I'm not some liability?" "They want to see that Adrian's priorities haven't shifted," Miles explained. "That he's still making smart decisions, still maintaining control, still someone they can trust to hold up his end of agreements. Then that's what we'll show them." Adrian pulled out his phone. "Set up a meeting, full council, tomorrow night." "Adrian," Miles started, "tomorrow night. If Castellano wants to question my fitness, he can do it to my face." Miles left to make arrangements. Lena stood in the kitchen, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her feet again. "This is my fault," she said quietly. "This is Castellano's fault for being a manipulative asshole." Adrian came to her, taking her hands. "Don't blame yourself for other people's games." "But if I wasn't here, if you weren't here, Castellano would find some other angle to attack me with. This is how this world works, Lena. People probe for weaknesses constantly. You're not the weakness. You're just the excuse he's using this time." "What happens at this meeting?" "I remind everyone why they respect me. I make it clear that my personal life doesn't interfere with business, and I ensure Castellano understands that challenging me has consequences." Adrian's voice was matter-of-fact, but there was steel underneath. "Will there be violence?" "Not if I do it correctly." He kissed her forehead. "But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Lena looked up at him. This man who'd turned her life upside down, who'd admitted to obsession and promised protection and somehow made her believe both were true. "Yes, I trust you." The next 24 hours passed in tense preparation. Adrian spent hours on the phone, shoring up alliances, making promises, calling in favors. Lena watched him work from the library, saw the way he shifted between charm and threat with seamless precision. This was the Adrian she'd glimpsed that first night in the warehouse, calculating, powerful, completely in control. That evening, he found her staring out at the gardens, anxiety churning in her gut. "You're worried," he said, coming up behind her. "Of course I'm worried. Your entire empire is being threatened because of me. Not because of you, because Castellano thinks he can use you against me." Adrian turned her to face him. "There's a difference." "Is there?" "Either way, I'm the problem." "You're not a problem. You're—" He stopped, searching for words. "You're the first thing in my life that matters more than power, and yes, that makes me vulnerable in ways I wasn't before, but it also makes me more dangerous." "How?" "Because now I have something worth protecting, something worth fighting for beyond territory and profit." His hands framed her face. "Castellano thinks that makes me weak. He's about to learn it makes me ruthless." The meeting was held in a private club downtown. Old money, wood paneling, portraits of men long dead watching from the walls. Adrian had explained the layout on the drive over, neutral ground, established decades ago as a place where disputes could be settled without bloodshed. Lena stayed close to Adrian as they entered, hyper-aware of the eyes tracking their movement. The room was already full. 10 men sat around a massive table, each representing a different family. Lena recognized Castellano immediately. He sat at the far end, looking pleased with himself. The others ranged in age from 30s to 70s, all wearing expensive suits, all watching Adrian with varying degrees of calculation. "Gentlemen," Adrian said, taking his seat. Miles stood behind him. "I understand there are concerns about my leadership. Let's address them." Castellano leaned back in his chair. "The concern, Adrian, is quite simple. You've allowed personal feelings to cloud your judgment. You've made yourself vulnerable through attachment." "Attachment to what? Be specific." "To her." Castellano gestured toward Lena, who stood near the door with 2 of Adrian's other security personnel. "You've brought a civilian into our world. Someone with no understanding of our operations, our rules, our necessities. That shows poor judgment. What it shows is that my personal life is separate from business." Adrian's voice was calm. "Lena has no involvement in operations. She poses no security risk. She's simply someone I care about." "And that's precisely the problem," another man interjected, older with silver hair and cold eyes. "Caring makes you exploitable. People will use her to get to you." "They can try." Adrian smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "They won't succeed." "You can't know that," Castellano pressed. "What happens when someone threatens her? When she becomes leverage in a negotiation? Will you make smart decisions, or will you choose her over business?" The room went quiet, everyone waiting for Adrian's answer. "I'll make the decision that protects my interests," Adrian said carefully, "which includes both my business operations and my personal relationships. One doesn't have to come at the expense of the other." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're going to get." Adrian's voice hardened. "My judgment has been sound for 5 years. I've increased our collective profits by 40%. I've negotiated peace with families that were at war for decades. I've expanded territory without significant bloodshed. My track record speaks for itself." "Your track record was built before her," Castellano said. "The question is whether you can maintain that success while being distracted by romance." Adrian stood slowly. The movement drew every eye in the room. "You want to know if I'm distracted, if I'm weak? Let me make something very clear." He placed his palms on the table, leaning forward. "Anyone who threatens Lena will disappear, not killed. That's too quick. They'll simply cease to exist in any meaningful way. No territory, no power, no protection. I will dismantle their life piece by piece until there's nothing left but regret." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "That's quite a threat," Castellano said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "It's not a threat. It's a promise." Adrian straightened. "You wanted to know where my priorities lie. Here it is. I will protect what's mine. My territory, my business, my people, and yes, Lena. Anyone who confuses protection for weakness is welcome to test me. I promise you won't like the results." "So you're admitting she's a priority," the silver-haired man said, "that you'd choose her over business interests." "I'm saying I don't have to choose because I'm good enough at this to protect both." Adrian's voice was cold. "But if you're forcing a hypothetical, if someone put a gun to her head and demanded I give up territory, I'd kill everyone in the room and take their territory too. Not because I'm weak, because I'm efficient. Lena's breath caught. There was no bluster in Adrian's voice, no bravado, just certainty. He meant every word. Castellano shifted in his seat. The council has a right to question decisions that affect all of us. The council has a right to question business decisions, Adrian interrupted. Who I spend my personal time with isn't council business unless it impacts operations. It hasn't. My deals are still solid. My territory is still secure. My word is still good. So unless you have actual evidence that Lena has compromised my judgment in a business context, this is just posturing. She was present at the warehouse meeting, Castellano said, where the shooting occurred. She was present because she asked to understand my world. The shooting was an unrelated incident, one I handled appropriately. The perpetrator's family dealt with him internally. We received appropriate compensation, and the matter is closed. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Or are you suggesting you had something to do with that shooting, Castellano? Because if you arranged an attack on me and failed, that would be a council matter. The implication hung heavy in the air. Castellano's face went red. I had nothing to do with that. Then it's irrelevant to this discussion. Adrian looked around the table. Let me be very clear about what's happening here. Castellano is attempting to destabilize my position because he wants access to my harbor contracts. This has nothing to do with my judgment and everything to do with his greed. If the council wants to discuss harbor allocations, we can do that. But don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is about Lena. Several of the men exchanged glances. Adrian had called it exactly. This was a power play dressed up as concern. The silver-haired man spoke up. The council's role is to maintain stability. If we believe a leader's personal entanglements create vulnerability for all of us, then you remove that leader and replace them with someone else, Adrian finished. So let's vote. Do I maintain confidence, or do you want to try finding someone else who can manage this territory as effectively as I do? The challenge was direct, unambiguous. Either they trusted him, or they didn't. I vote confidence, said a heavy-set man to Adrian's right. Adrian's been solid for years. One relationship doesn't change that. Agreed, said another. This seems premature. One by one, the votes came in. 7 for confidence, 2 abstentions. Only Castellano voted against. The majority holds, the silver-haired man said. Adrian maintains his position, but this council will be watching. Any sign that personal matters are affecting business decisions, and we revisit this conversation. Fair enough, Adrian nodded to the room. Gentlemen? He walked out without waiting for dismissal, Lena and Miles following. They didn't speak until they were in the car, doors closed, driving away. Then Adrian let out a long breath, tension draining from his shoulders. You okay? Lena asked. That was closer than I liked. He pulled her against him. But it worked. What happens to Castellano? Nothing immediate, but he's shown his hand. Everyone knows now that he's willing to destabilize the council for personal gain. That makes him a liability. Adrian's voice was thoughtful. Give it 6 months. His own family will remove him to protect their standing. You're going to destroy him without touching him. I'm going to let him destroy himself. Adrian kissed her temple. That's always more effective. Miles caught Lena's eye in the rearview mirror. You handled that well. Not many people could stand in a room full of criminals and not flinch. I was terrified, Lena admitted. Didn't show, Miles said. That's what matters. Back at the estate, Lena felt like she could finally breathe. The immediate threat had passed. Adrian's position was secure, but the experience had clarified something she'd been dancing around for weeks. I can't just be your girlfriend, she said as they entered the library. Adrian stopped. What? I can't just be the person you protect and shelter and keep separate from your world. That makes me a liability, exactly like Castellano said. Lena paced in front of the fireplace. I need to be more than that. You are more than that. To you, maybe. But to everyone else, I'm a weakness. Something to exploit. She turned to face him. I need to learn how this world works. Really learn it. The politics, the power structures, who owes what to whom. I need to understand it well enough that I can protect myself instead of always needing you to protect me. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. That means getting more involved, seeing things you can't unsee. I know. It means understanding how decisions get made, what enforcement looks like, the parts I've tried to keep you away from. I know. Lena repeated, but I'd rather see it and be prepared than stay ignorant and vulnerable. Adrian studied her, something like pride crossing his features. You're sure? I'm sure. Okay. He moved to the bar, poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed her one. We start tomorrow. Miles will teach you about security protocols and threat assessment. I'll teach you about the families, the alliances, the history. It won't be pleasant. I'm not looking for pleasant. I'm looking for survival. Adrian raised his glass. To survival, then. To survival, Lena echoed, and drank. The next 3 months were intense. Miles taught her to read people, to spot tells, to understand when a situation was about to turn dangerous. Adrian taught her the political landscape, which families had alliances with whom, what territories were stable and which were contested, how deals got made and enforced. She sat in on meetings, always silent, always observing, learning the rhythms of negotiation and threat. It was exhausting. Some nights she fell into bed feeling like her brain couldn't hold any more information. But she was learning, growing into a version of herself that could exist in Adrian's world without being crushed by it. And their relationship deepened. The physical intimacy came slowly. Lena wasn't ready to rush that part, and Adrian never pushed. But they grew closer in other ways. Inside jokes, shared looks across rooms, the easy comfort of people who'd learned each other's patterns. Lena started managing one of Adrian's restaurants, working with the staff to improve operations. She was good at it. All those years in the bakery had taught her about food service, and she had ideas about efficiency and customer experience. The restaurant's profits increased 20% in 2 months. You have a talent for this, Adrian said one evening, reviewing the books. I have a talent for survival, Lena corrected. Running a restaurant is just another form of it. Still, you're good at seeing what needs to change and implementing it. That's rare. Lena looked at him across the desk in his office. Do you ever regret it, bringing me into your life? Never. Why? Because everything would be simpler if you hadn't. No one questioning your judgment, no vulnerability for people to exploit. Simpler isn't better. Adrian came around the desk, pulling her up to stand with him. Before you, I was effective but empty. I had power, respect, success, but I didn't have anything that mattered beyond maintaining what I'd built. You gave me something to build toward instead of just protecting. That's a lot of pressure. Then let me carry it. His arms came around her. You've spent your whole life carrying everything alone. Let someone else share the weight for once. Lena leaned into him, breathing in his scent, expensive cologne and something uniquely him. I love you. I'm not sure I've said that clearly enough. You've said it. Adrian's voice was rough, but I'll never get tired of hearing it. I love you, she repeated, even though you're controlling and obsessive and probably need therapy. I love you too, even though you're stubborn and argumentative and eat all the good pastries before I get any. Lena laughed against his chest. It felt good to laugh, to find lightness in the middle of everything dark and complicated. That night, she made a decision. She led Adrian to her room, their room really, since he'd been sleeping there more often than not, and kissed him with clear intent. Are you sure? He asked against her mouth. I'm sure. What happened next was clumsy in places, perfect in others, real in ways that mattered more than technique. Afterward, lying tangled together, Lena felt something settle in her chest. This was her life now. Not the one she'd imagined, not anything she could have planned for, but hers, chosen deliberately, built with someone who saw her completely. What are you thinking? Adrian asked, fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. That I'm happy. Actually happy, not just surviving. She propped herself up on her elbow to look at him. I didn't think that was possible for me. Why not? Because happy wasn't something people like me got to be. We got to survive, if we were lucky. But happy felt like something for other people. People with families and safety nets and futures. You have those things now. I have you, Lena corrected, which is better and scarier than any of that. Adrian pulled her down for another kiss. Marry me. Lena froze. What? Marry me. Adrian's eyes were serious. I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring this out. But I've known for 3 years that I wanted this. You're the one catching up, so marry me, make it official. That's the least romantic proposal I've ever heard. You want romance? Fine. Adrian shifted, pulling her on top of him so she was straddling his hips. Lena Park, you're the most infuriating, resilient, brilliant person I've ever met. You've taken my carefully controlled life and turned it upside down in the best possible way. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to fight with you about pastries and business decisions, and whether my obsessive tendencies are cute or concerning. I want to build something with you that's bigger than territory and profit. So please, marry me and make me the happiest obsessive criminal in this city. Lena's eyes burned with tears. That's better. Is that a yes? It's a yes, but only if you promise to actually go to therapy. Because you definitely need it. Done. Adrian's smile was brilliant, unguarded, pure joy. Anything else? And you have to let me be a real partner. In business too, not just personally. I'm tired of sitting on the sidelines. You're already a partner. You just didn't have the title. He pulled her down for a kiss that tasted like promises and future and belonging. Anything else? No more secrets. If something threatens us, I need to know. No protecting me by keeping me in the dark. Agreed. Though I reserve the right to still be overprotective about your physical safety. I can live with that. Lena settled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. When? When what? When do you want to get married? Tomorrow, if possible, but I'm guessing you'll want actual planning time. A month, Lena decided. Small ceremony, just people who matter. Nothing big or flashy. Whatever you want. Adrian's arms tightened around her. As long as at the end of it, you're Lena Voss. The name settled over her like a promise. Lena Voss. Not Lena Park, the invisible girl barely surviving. Lena Voss, who ran businesses and understood power and loved a man dangerous enough to destroy anyone who threatened her. They planned the wedding for exactly 1 month later. Small, like Lena wanted, just Miles and a handful of Adrian's most trusted people, held in the estate's garden under strings of lights. Lena wore a simple dress, cream-colored and elegant. Adrian wore a dark suit and looked at her like she'd hung the moon. The ceremony was brief, the vows traditional. But when Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple platinum band because Lena had refused anything ostentatious, she felt the weight of it like an anchor. Something tethering her to earth, to this place, to this life she'd chosen. I love you, Adrian said after the officiant declared them married. I love you too, Lena replied. Even though you're completely insane. Especially because I'm completely insane. They kissed while their small group applauded, and Lena thought about the girl she'd been 4 months ago. Starving, invisible, convinced she'd never matter to anyone. That girl would never have believed this was possible. Standing in a garden, married to a man who'd moved heaven and earth to keep her, surrounded by people who respected her, not because of who she was connected to, but because of who she'd become. The reception was simple. Dinner, music, speeches that made Lena laugh and cry. Miles gave a toast about how he'd never seen Adrian happier. How Lena had managed to humanize a man most people considered barely capable of emotion. It was funny and touching and probably more honest than any wedding speech had a right to be. As the evening wound down, Adrian pulled Lena onto the makeshift dance floor. Just flagstones in the garden, but with the lights and the music, it felt magical. Happy? He asked, swaying with her. Terrified and happy at the same time, Lena rested her head on his shoulder. Is that normal? For us? Absolutely. Adrian's hand was warm on her back. You know we're going to have to announce this, to the families, to everyone. They'll have opinions. Let them have opinions. I'm not going anywhere. Some will see you as a weakness still, something to exploit. Let them try. Lena pulled back to look at him. I've learned a lot in 3 months. I'm not the scared girl who walked into your world anymore. No, Adrian agreed, pride evident in his voice. You're not. You're something much more dangerous. What's that? My equal. He kissed her forehead. And anyone who underestimates you is going to learn that mistake the hard way. 2 weeks later, there was an incident that proved Adrian right. A minor family made a move on one of Lena's restaurant suppliers, trying to force a protection payment. They assumed Lena would call Adrian, that she'd need him to handle it. Instead, Lena called Miles. Together, they traced the demand back to its source, identified the family's weak points, 3 businesses running on thin margins, and made a counteroffer. Drop the protection demand or Lena would use Adrian's resources to undercut their businesses until they collapsed. The family backed off immediately. When Adrian came home that night and Lena explained what had happened, he just smiled. "You didn't need me," he said. "I had Miles. But you didn't need me to fight your battles." Adrian pulled her close. "That's what I wanted for you. The ability to stand on your own even in this world." "I'll always need you," Lena corrected. "Just not the way I did before. Not as a savior or protector. As a partner." "Partners," Adrian agreed. "In everything." And they were. Over the next year, Lena became a known presence in Adrian's world, not as his wife tucked safely away, but as someone with her own influence, her own relationships, her own power base. She expanded the restaurant business, opened 2 more locations, proved she had a talent for management and negotiation. People who'd initially seen her as a liability started seeing her as an asset, someone who understood both the legitimate and underground sides of Adrian's empire, who could bridge gaps and smooth negotiations. She became the person other families came to when they wanted to approach Adrian with delicate matters, because she could read situations and advise on strategy. It wasn't the life Lena had imagined for herself, but it was hers, built from nothing, chosen deliberately, shared with someone who loved her fiercely and completely. And that made all the difference. One night, almost exactly a year after they'd met, Lena stood in the greenhouse among Adrian's orchids. He found her there, like he had so many times before. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "About how different everything is. A year ago, I was drowning. Now," she gestured around them, "now I have this, you, us, a life that actually means something. Do you regret it? Any of it?" Lena turned in his arms to face him. "I regret that it took me 21 years to find something worth living for instead of just surviving. But no, I don't regret you. Even the scary parts." "There will be more scary parts," Adrian warned. "This life doesn't get easier." "I know, but we'll handle them together." She kissed him, soft and sure. "That's what partners do." "Partners," Adrian agreed, and kissed her back. Outside the greenhouse, the city stretched out in all directions, dangerous, complicated, full of people who would happily destroy them if given the chance. But inside this space they'd built together, surrounded by carefully tended orchids and the warmth of being seen and loved, Lena felt safe. Not because Adrian protected her from the world, but because he'd given her the tools to protect herself while standing beside him. She'd spent her whole life invisible, believing she didn't matter. Adrian had seen her when no one else did, and in seeing her had helped her see herself. Not as a victim or a survivor, but as someone capable of building something beautiful from the ruins of her past. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no happily ever after promised, no guarantee that danger wouldn't find them again. But it was real. Messy and complicated and occasionally terrifying, but real. Built on honesty and choice and the stubborn refusal to let the darkness win. And for Lena Voss, who'd once been Lena Park and had learned that survival and living were 2 very different things, that was more than enough. It was everything.